I'm going to talk about behavior. I'm not going to talk anything about dyslexia. I'm just going to talk about behavior. For my entire career, all I've done is help parents and teachers figure out how to get children to do what we want them to do. And you know, when someone comes to me, that's all they want to know. How do I get my child to do what I tell them to do? Good luck with that. So I teach people how to manage behavior. I do not teach people how to control behavior. You cannot control a child's behavior. If you want to control something, go buy a dumb dog. You cannot control cats, you cannot control children. We can manage their behavior, and it's important to manage their behavior because that's how they're going to learn to eventually manage their own behavior. Why are we going to do this? Well, what has to happen is that we have to teach our kids how to negotiate conflict. And we do that through problem solving. Now, some kids learn this naturally. Some kids, we have to teach them. Some kids can do it under stress. Some of them can't. But it is imperative to teach kids how to resolve conflict if they're going to survive any social situation. And if people were better at resolving conflict, we would not have near as many bullies and victims. So that's why we're doing all of this. When you talk about problem solving requires a couple things. And people always ask me, well, why are we going to teach our children how to argue with us? No, this is not arguing. This is negotiation. And when you talk about problem solving, it is a collaborative effort. And a collaborative effort requires a couple of things whenever you talk about problem solving. Number one, you have to advocate your position. Our children are very good at advocating their position. They aren't very good at the second step. The second step after you advocate your position is you must inquire into the position of the other person. Children's definition of inquiry is advocate their position louder. They don't care what we think. So if you look, the definition of a problem is simply two concerns that have yet to be resolved. And problem solving is that collaborative effort between two or more people. Those of you who have never heard of Ross Greene is a colleague of mine. He's in Boston. He wrote a very interesting book a number of years ago called Treating Explosive Kids. It is a classic textbook. So I stole some of this from Dr. Greene. And when you talk about problem solving, when you talk about behavior management, you have three plans. Plan A involves the imposition of adults' will. Plan B involves engaging the child in a collaborative attempt at problem solving. And Plan C involves just reducing or removing the expectations. All of these work at certain times, and all of them are important. We're going to spend some time talking about A, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about B. When you talk about the success of any behavior management program, it requires three things. It requires us to be consistent, it requires us to be immediate, and it requires us to deal with specific behaviors. I tell people all the time that I would rather adults be consistently rotten than be inconsistent. Because if you were consistently rotten, at least the poor kids would know what to expect. Now, the second principle is immediacy. We have to apply a consequence to a behavior immediately after the behavior has occurred. Now, people go, how quick is that? Well, we think if you have a child under the age of about 10, within about 20 seconds. And here's the problem, guys. It doesn't matter what we think we are consequenting. It doesn't even matter what we tell children we are consequenting. The only thing that matters is what they think we are consequenting. This little guy comes into my office one day, and he tells me he's in trouble. He was frequently in trouble and was generally warranted, but it was interesting. But he was telling me he was in trouble, and what he was saying made absolutely no sense. So I asked him if we could get his mother to come in and help clarify this. He was all for that. So she comes in, I have him explain to us what the situation was. She looks at this child and says, no, honey, that is not why you're in trouble. You're in trouble because of this. He goes, oh, okay. So she's happy. She straightened him out. She gets up. She walks out. As soon as she closes the door, the kid turns around and says, you know, that's not why I'm in trouble. And he went back to talking about what he was 2 minutes ago. So it doesn't matter what we tell them. It only matters what they think. And we have that window of opportunity, and we have to use that window of opportunity. And you do that by managing very specific behaviors. And that's an awful lot of what Plan A does. And you really have to do part of Plan A, even though it looks up there that Plan B is the best, because that's collaborative problem solving, which is what we're supposed to be talking about. But we have to do part of Plan A first, and that's what I want to talk about now. When you look at Plan A, you focus on three things. You focus on positive behaviors, negative attention-seeking behaviors, and intolerable behavior. And let's face it, the most frequent intolerable behavior is noncompliance. Kids don't do what we tell them to do when we tell them to do it. The key to the program, though, the key to any kind of compliance training, and this is very important because if you don't do this part, you're never going to get to the collaborative problem solving. And that is positive behavior. Positive behavior and recognizing positive behavior is the key to any successful behavior management program. But it is also the behavior that we tend to ignore more than anything else. You have a child in the classroom who tends to be disruptive. Now he's sitting down doing well. What do? We say absolutely nothing because we don't want to rock the boat. You have a child at home, fights with his brother and sister. Now they're playing nicely. What do? Absolutely nothing. We don't want to rock the boat. It is a fatal strategic error. When a child exhibits a behavior, they don't necessarily know what we think of the behavior. And so what we have to do is we have to teach them what behaviors are expected. And the way we do that is simply by telling them. If you look, children are no different than adults. Children exhibit behaviors for which they are reinforced, and they don't exhibit behaviors for which they are punished. Now, everyone wants to know, how do I punish kids? Which is really kind of unimportant in the grand scheme of things. That's kind of unimportant. Punishment works. Punishment is anything that we do that decreases the behavior that they happen to be doing right now. Okay, sometimes what we think is a punisher is not, because it doesn't change behavior. But punishment works. But we don't want the behavior to be exhibited. So how do we prevent the behavior from occurring? And the most effective way to prevent the behavior from occurring is to reinforce a competing positive behavior. We exhibit behaviors for which we are reinforced too. Now, those of you who work outside of the home, one of the reasons I would imagine that you work outside of the home is because you like what you do. Another reason why you work outside of the home is you get paid for it. Now, I love what I do, but if I didn't get paid, I would go find something else to do. It's the same thing with kids. We're going to reinforce behavior. So people go, oh my gosh, we're going to bribe our children. No, bribes are illegal and immoral. We're not bribing our children. We're going to provide an incentive. And clearly, the most powerful reinforcer we have is simply our attention. Children like adult attention. They really do. But we give it to them at the wrong time. So what you have to do is you reinforce a positive behavior. And that's not saying, oh, you look so pretty today. No, it's what are they doing that we like? And we have to let kids know that. So I tell people all the time, let children know that you like what they're doing and you like being with them when they do it. Now, The next step is when you talk about negative behavior. And it's not intolerable behaviors. Look, kids, by and large, don't exhibit a whole lot of intolerable behavior. You know, we don't let them do something that's potentially dangerous to themselves. We don't let them do something potentially dangerous to somebody else. We don't let them destroy property, and they really do have to do what we tell them to do. But most of the negative behaviors children exhibit are not intolerable. Most of the negative behaviors that children exhibit are either negative attention-seeking behaviors or behaviors that are self-reinforcing. The most frequent, though, is negative attention-seeking behavior. So when a child exhibits a negative attention-seeking behavior, how do we discriminate between that and an intolerable behavior? The easiest way to do it is when they exhibit a behavior, if you want to discipline them, it's probably an intolerable behavior. If you want to kill them, it's probably a negative attention-seeking behavior. These are the behaviors that drive us nuts. So what do? When a child exhibits a behavior that we don't like, we call them on it. We have just paid attention to a negative attention-seeking behavior, which means we have just increased the likelihood that that behavior will continue. So what we do as adults is that we tend to punish positive behavior by ignoring it, and we reinforce negative behavior by paying attention to it. And that's the part that you have to turn around. Many times we have the right to remain silent, we just don't have the ability. Sometimes we just have to learn to be quiet. When we talk about collaborative problem solving, I'm going to give you the principles first, and then we'll talk about how you actually implement it. And you do three things: empathy, define the problem, and invitation. I also stole this from Dr. Green. When we sit down and talk to kids, first of all, we have to provide some empathy. And the empathy, it goes a long way because feeling heard helps people think that they're understood. And it acknowledges, when you do the empathy part, it acknowledges that the child has a legitimate concern and helps define that concern. And when you look at the second conceptual step is define the problem. In the first step, the child gets to define the problem. In the second step, we get to tell them what our concern and consideration is. And then the third step is we simply invite them to collaboratively brainstorm on how to solve the problem. So let's go through the steps a minute. The first step, what is the problem? That sounds like that's pretty simple to define. No, it's not. What happens is, when you try to define a problem, when you try to get a child to define a problem, they won't define the real problem. They define a second or a third generation problem. And we have to back them up to get them to find out what the real problem is. Child comes in, and he says, I'm grounded. And that's the problem I want to solve. My response is, no. You being grounded is not a problem. You being grounded sounds like it's a consequence. I'm guessing either you did something you shouldn't have done, or you did something you shouldn't have done, or you didn't do something you should have done. One of those two things. No, that's not why I'm in trouble. Okay, why are you in trouble? Well, my mom's upset. Oh, your mom gets up on the wrong side of the bed and grounds you. Yeah, no. Why is your mother upset? My little brother's crying. Now I'm guessing you probably did something you shouldn't have done. But are you going to try to convince me that the problem is your little brother cries, your mother gets upset, and you're grounded? Why is your little brother crying? Oh, I hit him. Now, would you be willing to consider that the real problem here is that you hit your brother? After some thought, he decides, yes. And my response to him is, no. Hitting your brother is not the problem. Why did you hit your brother? Oh, he came into my room and bothered my stuff. Two potential problems. Can your brother come into your room as long as he doesn't bother anything? Yes. That's not a problem. Can your brother bother your stuff? No, my brother can never touch my stuff because every time he touches it, he breaks it. As soon as I hear never, or always, I know we're in trouble. So now we know what the problem is. This brother bothers his stuff. And so when you look at defining the problem, when you look at how you go about doing that, you can do that generally in a sentence or two, and it really has to include what a person is doing or not doing that is of concern. Now, everybody, since we're talking about collaborative problem solving, if there's two people involved, each of them get to define the problem as they see it. If they can't agree on that, then we're going to problem solve two things. But most of the time, we can get them to agree because they don't want to solve two things. Once you define what the problem is, you simply generate possible solutions. Notice that it says generate possible solutions. It does not say generate good possible solutions. This is a brainstorming activity. And if you start to edit, either as a teacher or a parent, if you start to edit, you are guaranteed that they'll shut down. Because what they're going to do is say, well, then you just tell me what you want me to do. So you get them to come up with as many solutions to a problem as they possibly can. And the way that I do that is, okay, so your brother bothers your stuff. What could you do about that? Well, I could ask him to get out of my room. That's one thing you do. What else could you do? I could go get my mother and ask her to get him out of my room. It's one thing you could do. What else could you do? I could let him play with my stuff because he's probably not going to break it anyway. It's one thing you do. What else could you do? I give kids the same response, and this is really important if you're going to do this. You give kids the same response every time they come up with a possible solution because you don't want them to choose or eliminate a solution based upon your perceived enthusiasm or lack thereof. But they have to come up with possible solutions. Just because some kids will say, well, I can't think of anything. My response is, well, you better sit and think about it for a while. I always used to have a college professor that he ended every class with, go home and cogitate copiously on our topic tonight. Not being very bright, I had to go home and look up all those words. It means think about it real hard. So, if they can't come up with a solution, a possible solution, I sit them down until they come up with some possible solutions. But if they come up with some solutions, not necessarily good ones, but if they come up with some solutions, and then they say they can't think of anything else, that's the time that you can add a possible solution if you think of one. So when he was all done, I said, well, I can think of something you can do if your brother bothers your stuff. What? You could hit him. Now, child's eyes get big as silver dollars. Well, if I can hit him, let me tell you what else I can do to him. Now I know I'm going to get 99 ways to maim your little brother. I let him come up with one more, and I said, okay, we're going to take hitting, kicking, pitching, gouging. We're going to throw all those things together, and we're going to say you could hurt your little brother, because I was not going to listen to all of that stuff. Now, there's a specific reason why I told him he could hit his little brother. Number one, it's a possible solution. Number two, it is the solution this kid consistently chose. And number three, they never wanted to talk about it. We have to get it on the table. Now, if it was not his routine to hit his little brother during this conflict, I'm not going to give him that idea. I always present the idea that they do already, but no one wants to talk about. So keep that in mind. So you generate possible solutions and you don't edit. You don't get to edit. You will at some point in time, but you don't get to edit. After you generate possible solutions, what do? You simply evaluate the pros and cons of each of those alternatives. There are advantages and disadvantages. Advantages and disadvantages to every possible solution. And we may not want to believe that, but there are. There is a positive to hitting your younger brother. We as parents don't want to admit it, but there is an advantage to that. What's the advantage of hitting your younger brother? Now you have to remember, I come from a very large family. I have 6 brothers. I'm the second oldest. I am also the runt of the family. I come from very large stock. So all of my brothers are big. I mean, we go home for a family reunion, and they're all basketball players. They say, throw it to the little guy. Let's see if he comes down the lane. Nope, I'll stay out here. Now, what's the advantage of hitting your younger brother? Number 1, if I hit him, he might leave me alone for a while. Number 2, I'm older than he is. I have a pretty good idea when mom's going to come home, and about 15 minutes before her scheduled arrival, I'm going to make nice to him, and he'll forget that I hit him. And I'll be okay. But there's some disadvantages. What happens if mom comes home early? What happens if I hit him too hard and he's not going to forgive me? What happens if I lose track of time? So there are potential disadvantages. And there was one more disadvantage in my house, in that I had younger brothers. They were a lot bigger than I was, and they didn't have the impulse control that I did. And I was afraid they'd get to be like 11 or 12. They're going to be able to roll me up and put me in their pocket. So I decided I wasn't going to hit my little brothers anymore. So you go through the advantages and disadvantages. And if there's 2 kids doing this, each of them get to come up with the advantages and the disadvantages. Because an advantage for one may be a disadvantage for another. The other thing we want to know here, in reality, is this solution that we're talking about, is it realistic? If it's realistic, they believe it's realistic, it stays on the table. If they think it's not realistic, it comes off the table. So if he says, yeah, it's realistic that I hit my little brother, okay, stays on the table. But if he says no, we take it off, we're not going to talk about it anymore. After you evaluate the pros and cons, you simply choose the solution. And here's the hard part, guys, for parents and for teachers. I try to get adults to accept any solution the child comes up with, even if we don't think it's going to work. But there's one caveat to that. We have to be willing to live with the consequence. So now, if in step 3, hit your brother was a realistic solution, in step 4, no, it's not. It comes off the table. We're not going to talk about it anymore. So you have to keep that in mind. Because look, different's different. Different is not necessarily wrong. It's just different. And one solution for us may not be a good solution for somebody else. Before we get to decide how to implement the solution, I'll tell you another couple stories. I like to tell stories. So, you also have to remember that whomever has the problem has to be the one who does the problem solving. And then we are going to help them try to solve that problem. But sometimes adults don't actually realize who has the problem. I am sitting in my office at home, working diligently. My high school student is downstairs allegedly doing his homework. The pictures on my wall are rattling. The music is so loud, the pictures on my wall are rattling. So I go down the stairs, turn off the music, and that got his attention. So he did what lots of teenagers do. What? Ben, there is no way in the world that you can do your homework with the music that loud. I don't think you can do your homework with the music on, period. Here was my problem. He was doing math. This is what my child said about math. You know, Dad, I really don't like math very much. I just happen to be very, very good at it. So he's doing his math. So when I said he can't concentrate well enough to do his homework, he hands me the paper and says, find one wrong answer. There were none. So now, let me back up a second. You can do problem solving at a young age. We've been successful at teaching kids as young as 4 to problem solve in a systematic fashion. There's a little bit watered down version of this, but we've done it. Unfortunately, being the child of a child psychologist who did research, my child was in every study for which he was deemed eligible. He was one of the 4-year-olds. So he'd been problem solving at this time for years. And he was a typical teenager, which means he could be a smart aleck. So, since he had been problem solving forever, he said, Dad, let me tell you what I think the problem is. I think the problem is that my music's too loud and you can't concentrate upstairs. So here's my potential solution. You will go upstairs and you will work. I will turn back on the music. I will turn it down so you cannot hear it. And then I will continue doing my math homework error-free. What am I going to say? Okay, so I go upstairs. Now, he's a teenager. Because one of the steps of problem solving is after you're all done, you have to evaluate whether the solution worked or not. So I went upstairs, and in about 5 minutes, my child appears in the doorway and asks, so how's this solution working for you, Dad? Great, get out of my office. Now, so I could still hear the music a little bit. And then I realized there's no music. Well, I know he has homework, but there's no music. So I get up and go back downstairs. And now he's laying on the couch, and he's doing his English homework. And so I ask, what are you doing? My homework. Why isn't the music on? I can only listen to the music when I'm doing math and science, Dad. I can't concentrate when I'm reading. He identified what the problem was, and he solved it. And that's what we have to do. We have to give him a chance to do that. So, up until this point in time, this is nothing but an intellectual exercise. We have accomplished nothing. When you sit down with kids, at this point in time, we have accomplished absolutely nothing. What constitutes compliance? Who's going to monitor that compliance? How will the monitoring be carried out? What are the consequences of compliance? What are the consequences of non-compliance? And what obstacles do you anticipate? What's going to get in the way? If you sit down and you have 2 kids and you're problem solving with 2 kids, one of them may not be willing to do it. And so you have to anticipate what's going to happen. You'll have a child who has an unreasonable parent. Well, what are you going to do? You have to play the hand that you're dealt, and so you have to work with the kids on how to deal with that unreasonable parent. So, there's certain keys to any successful problem-solving approach. First of all, it's a business discussion. Students and our children can get us wound up, and if we do not treat it like a business discussion, they have won. You have to have patience. Sometimes you have to have the patience of Job. And there are some kids that simply can't do this in the heat of the battle. You're going to have to let them calm down. Initially, when you start, you just reinforce effort. Reinforcing effort increases the likelihood that they'll keep going. And the other thing is you use problem solving to anticipate that a problem is going to occur, because the best form of problem solving is you simply plan. Use it as a planning tool. And kids don't think that they can be very good problem solvers. But you know, I see lots of dyslexic, dysgraphic problems, but I'm treating the behavior. So, and let's face it, an awful lot of my kids, because of the behaviors, because of their academic challenges at school, homework challenges, a lot of my kids become oppositional. And that's a real challenge. Almost all of my kids are oppositional. Other than occasionally my wife, I am nobody's idea of a good time. People come to me because they're desperate. So, we have oppositional kids. And some of them view this as a sport. Being oppositional is a sport. But there's a reason for it, guys. And the reason is, if I can engage you in a discussion, a negotiation, an argument, I'm probably not doing what you've told me to do. And that is an example of negative reinforcement. So, let's talk a little bit about that. And there's a well-known psychological principle that we have to talk about, and that is the principle of intermittent reinforcement. Everyone knows about the principle of intermittent reinforcement. They just didn't know what it was called. The principle of intermittent reinforcement says that if you reinforce the behavior occasionally, the behavior will stay forever. There's two examples of the principle of intermittent reinforcement that work real well in the adult world. Most frequent example of the principle of intermittent reinforcement, a paycheck. You go to work Monday through Friday, but you only get paid on Friday. You've accepted 4 no's for 1 yes, but the yes is pretty good, so we're willing to do that. You get paid every other Friday. You accept 9 no's for 1 yes, but the yes is bigger. We're willing to do that. You get paid once a month. You accept 19 no's for 1 yes, but the yes is really big. And so we do that. Now, we have a huge advantage over kids. Number one, we know when it's coming. We know we're going to get paid every Friday. We know we're going to get paid every other Friday. We know we're going to get paid on the last day of the month. And so we can anticipate it. That helps us. A better example of the principle of intermittent reinforcement with children, Las Vegas. Las Vegas was built upon the principle of intermittent reinforcement. If you go to Las Vegas, chances are pretty good you're going to gamble, because that's what most people do. I go to Las Vegas every now and then because my wife believes that it's the shopping mecca of the world. And she has a meeting out there that she goes to every year. She goes to this meeting. And I always want to go with her. Now, one year she asked, well, why in the world do you want to go out there? You don't gamble. And I'm in a meeting all day long. What in the world do you do? And my response was, I go to the casino. But you don't gamble, because you know the principle of intermittent reinforcement. No, but I watch people who don't know the principle of intermittent reinforcement. It's my entertainment. Now, here's what we know. We know that if you gamble, you play a slot machine out there, you know if you play it long enough, you're going to win. I guarantee you will win. I can't guarantee this next statement, but I can come pretty close. You will lose more than you will win. You just don't know when it's coming. So, in the olden days, you put your coin in the machine and you push the button. I'm really old. You used to pull the lever. And you lose. Oh, I knew I was going to lose. Maybe it's the next coin that goes in this machine. Put your coin in, push a button, you lose. I knew I was going to lose. Maybe it's the next coin that goes in this machine. Put your coin in, you eventually win. What's everyone's reaction? My God, I'm rich. You pick up your money and you start all over to win more money. You don't bother to think. You dump $400 in that machine, you get $300 back. Hope springs eternal. Now that's how it applies to kids. Mom, can I have a cookie? No, honey, you can't have a cookie. We're going to eat dinner in an hour. You can have a piece of cheese, you can have some carrots, but no, you can't have a cookie. Oh, please, Mom, I'm starving to death. Just one cookie. No, you can't have a cookie. Okay. I asked, you said no. I begged, you said no. So now I quit. That's what most kids do. Not the kids I get to see. The kids I get to see, you have just thrown down the gauntlet. I will get that cookie. I will bug you and bug you and bug you and bug you until you give it to me. Now, you could be pretty frustrated and maybe downright angry with me. I don't care. I have learned in my few years on this earth that parental frustration with my behavior is merely collateral damage. I can fix that, because if you give me the cookie, even if it's just to shut me up, I got the cookie. You're collateral damage, and I know how to fix it. Oh, you are the greatest mom in the whole world. I love you so much. All is forgiven. I got the cookie. Now, I don't always get the cookie. Today I got the cookie. Yesterday I did not get the cookie. Because you must have gotten a lot of sleep that night. And you could withstand my onslaught. What's going to happen tomorrow? I don't know. But it's worth finding out. And so they keep going. And this is, when you anticipate that stuff like this is going to happen, that's when you can sit down and plan for it. Now you can use problem solving to address that issue that you know is going to come up tomorrow. When I came to Austin, I was asked, as soon as I came here, because I came from being a professor in Galveston, I came to Austin and I was asked to design a research program for very severe attention deficit oppositional kids. We set out, what they wanted was a summer program. And so we set out and we did a summer program where we held on to the kids 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, sort of like what you guys have at school. Now, my children in that program were all very colorful. They had some really colorful behaviors. We taught the kids how to do it. And when you sit down and problem solve, we can problem solve. When you talk about time constraints, once you get kids to buy into it, you can problem solve this stuff in 30 seconds. We had kids who would sit down, and these were really oppositional kids. They would identify that they have a problem with somebody else, and they would sit down and they would either say, let's problem solve or let's negotiate. And we left them to do it. And they could do it in a matter of 30 seconds to a couple of minutes, even though it seems like it's hard, but they would do that. And they would also do it with us. So the time problem is in teaching them how to do it and reinforcing. That does take some time. But you know, I think it's time well spent. And you can take a few minutes, because whether you have a classroom of oppositional or a classroom of kids who also have dyslexia, you're going to have other neurologically normal developing kids. But you use this, and we use those people also as role models. We use those people as role models. But they're also going to have those same kinds of concerns. So this applies to everybody. I would, you take a few minutes and you do it, but after they learn how to do it, they don't need you anymore. Not the problem solve, which is good if it's conflict between the two of them. And if it's conflict with us, you just keep them on track. We became teachers and we became parents because we like children. We didn't become teachers and parents because we wanted to make our children's lives miserable. So I will leave you with this. At the end of the day, let us all go home and enjoy our children. Thank you.